You know that feeling when you are about to check your bank balance on your phone? Like that little unmistakable spike of adrenaline right before the screen actually loads?
Oh, yeah. It
Yeah.
really is the ultimate modern jump scare.
Right. It is almost like bracing for a monster in a horror movie. You hold your breath, your thumb hovers over the app, and you just pray the damage isn't as bad as you think it is.
Yeah, you're squinting at the screen, heart beating just a little bit faster. You're just hoping the number staring back at you somewhat matches the, well, extremely optimistic number you have floating around in your head.
And it rarely does.
Like almost never.
Never. And if you are the kind of person listening to this deep dive right now, someone who wants to be well-informed and capable, that blind spot is incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, you want to feel like you have a handle on your life.
Exactly. But today's topic is one that usually makes even the most put-together, highly educated people want to run for the hills. We are talking about the mechanics and really the psychology of budgeting.
Ugh, the dreaded B word.
B word.
Just hearing it makes people physically tense up. I mean, they immediately associate it with a loss of joy, a loss of spontaneity, and frankly, a lot of guilt.
Totally. It feels like a punishment. But that is exactly what we are going to challenge today. We have a highly practical video breakdown in our sources, simply titled How to Stick to Your Budget.mp4.
Sounds very clinical.
It sounds completely clinical, yeah. But the mission of this deep dive is to completely reframe how you view your finances. We want to move you away from that jump scare stress and toward total control. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
The material starts by acknowledging the universal truth that budgeting is difficult, but then it drops a core thesis that honestly feels totally counterintuitive at first glance. It argues that budgeting isn't about restriction, it is about freedom.
Which is a massive paradigm shift. I mean,
Yeah.
usually when we think of a budget, we think of a financial crash diet.
Yeah, a diet.
We think of all the things we are suddenly not allowed to do anymore. We focus entirely on the deprivation.
Right, but is a budget actually less like a dietary crash restraint and more like, say, setting the GPS for a road trip?
Oh, I like that.
Think about it. When you turn on your GPS, you aren't trapped in the car. It isn't a prison. You just finally know where you are going.
Yeah.
You can still take scenic routes, you can pull over for snacks, but you have a map that guarantees you won't end up lost in the middle of nowhere.
I really love that analogy. A GPS doesn't judge you for taking a detour. It just recalculates and tells you how to get back on track so you don't run out of gas.
But I do have to push back a little here because the material also explicitly states that a budget keeps you accountable. And honestly,
It's a scary word.
it is. Doesn't the use of the word accountable inherently feel like a restriction to most people? It sounds like you have a principal looking over your shoulder, grading your spending habits, waiting for you to mess up. That doesn't feel like a fun road trip.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, accountability in this context isn't about punishment at all. The breakdown specifically links this accountability to reducing stress and gaining control.
Okay.
Think about that pre-bank balance jump scare we just talked about. Where does that anxiety actually come from?
From not knowing.
Exactly. It comes from the unknown.
Yeah.
True freedom isn't the ability to just buy whatever you want in a given moment without thinking. True freedom is the absence of that gnawing daily anxiety.
Wow. Yeah.
When you hold yourself accountable to a plan, you remove the unknown. You're trading a fleeting, impulsive moment of freedom at the checkout counter for long-term psychological freedom.
You're trading the jump scare for peace of mind. Okay, I can get behind that. So how do we actually build this GPS map?
We need starting coordinates.
Right, we need coordinates. And the very first foundation is figuring out how much fuel is actually in the tank.
Yeah.
Assessing your income. Now, normally we just think of our salary.
Sure, the standard paycheck.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The breakdown specifically highlights salary, freelance work, or any side gigs. It forces you to look at the entire landscape, not just the traditional paycheck.
That is a crucial inclusion because it reflects the reality of how people actually earn a living today. It acknowledges that the terrain of our financial map is often incredibly uneven.
Right.
For many people, their income is like a patchwork quilt. They have a main job, maybe a freelance hustle on the weekends, maybe a side gig selling things online.
But why is it so important to lump all of that together? Isn't extra money just extra money?
Well, this raises a really important question about behavioral economics. Psychologically, people tend to categorize side gig money completely differently than their salary.
Oh, totally.
They treat their main paycheck as serious money for rent and bills, and they treat side hustle money as bonuses off the books fun money. They just don't track it.
It's invisible money.
Exactly. But if you don't assess all of those disparate streams and combine them into one solid foundational number, your entire budget is built on a fiction. You have to capture every single dollar coming in, or the math will never, ever work.
Okay, so we've figured out exactly how much water is flowing into the bucket. But for most of us, it always feels like the bucket is completely empty by the 20th of the month.
Life is always a leak.
Which means we have a leak.
Right.
And that means we have to actually look at the damage. The next phase is tracking expenses, keeping a record of where every single dollar goes.
This is the hard part.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And the material draws a hard, specific line between two categories: fixed expenses like your rent and variable expenses like your groceries. Now, I'll be honest, I completely understand tracking rent, but the idea of looking at my last 30 days of DoorDash receipts makes me feel physically ill. There is a reason we keep those behaviors invisible.
And that physical illness, that dread you're describing, is exactly why this phase is non-negotiable.
I knew you were going to say that.
It is where the real detective work happens. Fixed expenses are exactly that fixed. Your rent, your car payment, your insurance. Yeah. These are large, predictable boulders in your financial stream.
You can't ignore them.
Right. You know they are there, you know exactly how big they are, and you maneuver around them. They don't cause the leaks.
The boulders are just facts of life.
Exactly. But the variable expenses, those are the slippery ones. Groceries, yes, but also all those tiny transactions that feel completely insignificant in the moment.
The coffee.
The coffee, the random online impulse buy, the 3 different streaming services you totally forgot you subscribed to. The breakdown emphasizes that tracking is what identifies your true spending habits.
That's the key phrase, isn't it? Spending habits.
It is. Tracking isn't about doing math. Tracking takes invisible behaviors and forces them to become visible.
Making the invisible visible. Because nobody actually thinks they have a habit of overspending.
No, of course not.
If you ask someone, they'll say, "Oh, I just got a fancy latte as a treat today." It's a one-off in their mind.
Right.
It's only when you are forced to write it down and you see 22 individual coffee transactions in a single month that the illusion breaks.
Right.
You realize, oh, this isn't a rare treat. This is an entrenched behavioral habit.
Precisely. And you cannot change a habit if you actively refuse to look at it. Tracking forces you to confront your actual historical behavior, not the idealized, highly disciplined version of yourself you have invented in your head.
That is brutal, but necessary. So we've audited the income, we've tracked the expenses and exposed all our terrible habits.
All of them.
We have all our raw materials scattered out on the table. Now we move to the architecture of choice. We actually have to build the budget framework.
Step 3.
Right. And the instruction here is very deliberate. It demands that we divide expenses into needs and wants. And then crucially, we must list the needs first, followed by the wants.
Right.
It makes me think of packing a suitcase for a long trip. You have to pack your absolute essentials, your needs, your socks, your toothbrush, your medication first.
Makes sense.
Whatever space is left over in the suitcase is where you are allowed to fit your luxury items, your wants. You don't put the heavy luxury items in first and then just cross your fingers and hope you can squeeze your toothbrush in later.
That suitcase analogy is perfect because it highlights the structural hierarchy of a functional budget. And notice what the material does not say here.
What's that?
It does not say eliminate all of your wants. It doesn't forbid joy.
Which is the biggest fear.
Exactly. People think budgets mean no fun ever again. But the source explicitly includes wants in the budgeting process. They just come second in the structural hierarchy to ensure the math aligns with your income.
Right.
Your income is the hard physical shell of that suitcase. You cannot pack more than the shell allows.
But let me ask you this, because I know how human brains work, isn't it incredibly tempting to try and sneak your luxury items into the socks category?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, I can easily convince myself that my premium cable package is a need because it provides stress relief, which is good for my health. People bend the definitions, right?
They do. The psychology of justification is incredibly powerful. We are absolute masters at rationalizing our desires as necessities.
Yes.
But the math doesn't care about our rationalizations.
Yes.
If you artificially inflate your needs category with wants, the suitcase still won't close. The income boundary remains rigid.
So you're only cheating yourself.
Exactly. What this hierarchy really offers is permission. Once your true foundational needs are packed and accounted for, whatever money is left over, is yours to direct toward your wants without guilt.
Without the jump scare feeling.
Exactly. Budgeting isn't eliminating joy, it is organizing it so that when you spend on a want, it feels good. It's planned joy, rather than a guilty pleasure that might compromise your ability to pay rent next week.
It's giving yourself permission to spend. I love that. So the budget is built, the suitcase is packed. But a budget isn't just about surviving the current month. It is about looking out at the horizon.
Setting goals.
Right. The next phase is setting realistic goals. The breakdown suggests deciding where you want to save, like paying off debt or funding a vacation, and it hammers home the point that these targets must be monthly and achievable.
Achievable is the key word there.
Why the emphasis on achievable, though? Doesn't shoot for the moon apply to finances?
Not if you want to actually succeed.
Yeah.
If your goal is massive and vague, like, I want to be debt-free, it becomes a crushing weight.
Because it's so far away.
Exactly. The horizon is too far away. You don't feel any progress, so you just give up. But if your target is, I will pay an extra $50 toward my credit card this month, that is a defined, actionable, achievable step.
It's right in front of you.
Yes, it gives the budget forward momentum. You aren't just treading water in the ocean, you are swimming toward a highly specific, visible shore.
But the water gets choppy. Life is messy and unpredictable, which naturally brings us to the reality check. The material insists we must review and adjust the budget regularly.
Step 5.
It says, and I quote, "Life changes. Your budget should too." It recommends checking in monthly or even weekly to catch overspending early. Now let me just throw a flag on the play here.
Uh-oh.
If I build this beautiful, logical GPS map and I have to constantly adjust it every single week because I am overspending on my variable categories, doesn't that mean I failed?
Not at all.
Doesn't that mean the map is broken and the budget didn't work?
What's fascinating here is that the material anticipates exactly that feeling of failure, and it completely reframes the purpose of the review process.
How so?
Well, a budget is not a static monolith carved in stone. It is a living, breathing document. Checking it weekly and making adjustments is not a sign of failure.
It really feels like failure, though.
It feels like it because we view budgets as tests we have to pass. But the breakdown explicitly positions the review process as a diagnostic tool, not a report card.
Yeah.
Catching overspending early isn't a failure. It is the system working exactly as designed.
So it's a course correction.
Exactly.
It's like the rumble strips on the side of the highway. If you start to drift out of your lane because you got distracted, the rumble strips make a terrible noise and vibrate the car. They wake you up before you end up in a ditch. Adjusting your budget weekly is just hitting the rumble strips and steering back into the center of the lane.
That is perfectly said. The rumble strips aren't punishing you, they are saving you. If your car needs a sudden expensive repair, or if your utility bill spikes because of a freak heat wave, your fixed numbers change.
Because life happens.
Life happens. If your budget cannot adapt to those messy life changes, it is a useless document. The regular review process is the exact mechanism that keeps the theory of budgeting functional in the real, unpredictable world.
So what does this all mean when we take all of these concepts and actually apply them to a real human being?
Let's look at the case study.
Let's do it. The breakdown provides a really concrete case study to prove that this whole process culminates in that freedom we were promised at the start. It asks us to look at Emma.
Right, Emma.
So Emma earns $3,000 monthly, so there is her foundational income assessed.
Step 1 done.
Next, she tracks her expenses. And the breakdown gives us her specific numbers. She spends $1,000 on rent, $300 on groceries, $200 on entertainment, and then there is a category just labeled more.
Ah, yes. The notorious and more category.
Yeah, let's just do the math out loud for a second. Rent, groceries, entertainment, that equals $1,500 explicitly accounted for. Emma makes $3,000.
So she's missing half.
She only has visibility on exactly half of her income.
That and more category is the absolute crux of Emma's entire financial struggle.
Which is mind-blowing. How do you just lose $1,500?
Well, before she sat down and did the uncomfortable work of tracking her expenses, that other $1,500 was just vanishing into the ether. She had no idea where half of her livelihood was going every 30 days.
But then you realize it's not a single $1,500 purchase.
No, it rarely is.
It is the snowball effect. It's the $15 lunch, the $8 coffee, the $30 impulsive Amazon purchase late at night. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yep.
But the visibility of tracking allowed her to finally spot the drain.
Exactly. Because after assessing her tracked behavior, she realizes she can easily cut back on dining out. That was the invisible habit hiding in the dark corners of the "and more" category.
Dining out is always the culprit.
It is the classic variable expense that quickly spirals out of control because each individual purchase feels small enough to ignore.
And what I find so compelling about this case study is what Emma does not do.
What's that?
She didn't get a promotion. She didn't suddenly inherit a pile of money from a long-lost relative. Her income boundary never changed.
Right.
She simply identified a variable habit that wasn't serving her, and she shifted that exact same money toward a savings goal. She redirected the flow of her existing resources.
She took control of the wheel. And the result, the material uses a very specific word to describe her new financial life.
Effortless.
Yes. It says she sticks to her budget effortlessly.
Effortlessly. I mean, that is the ultimate dream, because the friction is finally gone. The budget is no longer fighting her lifestyle. The budget is actively facilitating the lifestyle she actually wants to be living.
The effort was entirely front-loaded. The pain was in the assessing, the uncomfortable tracking of the DoorDash receipts, and the creating of the hierarchy.
Right.
But once that architecture was built and the invisible habits were brought into the light, the day-to-day execution became smooth. The anxiety was replaced by clarity. She achieved the exact psychological freedom from financial stress that the material promised in the very beginning.
It is incredibly empowering when you actually break it down beyond just the math and look at the behavior behind it.
Oh.
We have taken something that feels scary and amorphous, that jump scare feeling, and turned it into a logical, psychological roadmap.
We really have.
So let's quickly recap the terrain we've covered for you today. First, you have to assess the water flowing into the bucket, every single drop, including those side gigs that your brain tries to tell you is just bonus fun money.
Don't ignore the side gigs.
Second, you track the leaks. You make your invisible, comfortable habits painfully visible. Then you build the architecture, packing that suitcase with your absolute needs first, which buys you the guilt-free permission to pack your wants.
The fun stuff.
Right. You set goals that are actually achievable so you don't drown in the distance. And finally, you use regular reviews as rumble strips to keep your car on the road when life inevitably gets messy.
That's the whole map.
The material leaves us with a surprisingly warm call to action. It simply says, start your budgeting journey today. You've got this. It genuinely believes that anyone, regardless of their current mess, can master this.
And they absolutely can. The math mechanics are actually quite simple. It is the psychology of habit and avoidance that trips us up.
Yeah.
So if we are thinking about that psychology, about the power of tracking where your money actually goes, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. It builds directly on this idea of making your invisible behaviors visible. If a complete stranger were to look at your tracked variable expenses from just the last 30 days, what would they assume your biggest priorities in life are?
Oh, wow.
And more importantly, does that assumption match what you actually want them to be?
Wow. If my receipts are any indication, my biggest priority in life is apparently artisanal tacos.
There are worse priorities.
That is a question that will absolutely stick with you the next time you go to tap your card. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. Remember, taking control of that jump scare feeling isn't about restriction. It's about claiming your freedom. Until next time, keep exploring and keep learning.